album Truth Is Not Fiction. I love that song. I can't remember the first time I heard it, but just after, I think that was the first time I ever listened to Otis Taylor. And I just fell in love with his music after that song. So I'm glad that came up. Like I said, I'm doing pretty well. Haven't had anything too embarrassing come up over the past few episodes. So I'm due, and we'll see. In a second here, we're going to go ahead and call John.
Hey.
Hey, what's up, man?
Good. You've got a really tight schedule. You're so much more consistent than my co-host.
You mean just like getting you right back on, or just the timing of it? Like
Both.
literally. Yeah, man. I'm trying to be consistent with this podcast thing. One of the things I guess I'm learning, and I don't know if it's true or not, but they say consistency is one of the most important things as to getting discovered and getting other people to listen to your podcast. I don't know if that's true. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I do 3. One of them is random because it's based on the availability of the co-host, but not many people listen to that, so it's more like a labor of love. But the other 2 is once a month, but define consistency. If I'm doing it once a month, does that mean my numbers are going to be better?
I don't know. Like, I do it every Sunday.
Yeah.
So I'm doing one a week. And the thing about it is, like, what I kind of don't like about that is, like, especially when I have, like, a really good episode, is I don't feel like a week is, like, long enough to digest the episode. You know, because it's like you dropped a really big meal on somebody, and then you're like, all right, here's another meal. And it almost feels like it's too quick, but people consume things so quick. I don't know.
There's a podcast called The Art of Charm, and they were releasing 2 episodes a week, and it was so information dense, I just gave up on it. But it's all about how to be a better person.
Right.
so I'm tactfully acknowledging that I'm not going to become a better person by not listening to their podcast anymore.
Yeah, so like I couldn't tell you if there's any truth to consistency and being, discovered or having more people discover your podcast. And that's what I mean when I say discover, just having more people find your podcast.
Right.
I don't know.
Are we? Yeah, go on. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Are we live now?
Yeah, we're live. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, we're on.
No, I assume so, but I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
But I said to you in between episodes, I wanted to just clarify a few things and sort of recap, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
And listening to the podcast after it was recorded, I got to listen to the intro and the outro.
The music.
Say again?
The music.
Yeah, so you were making a comment about music. I mean, I like the random choice that you get your computer to make for you. But you were talking about the consumption of music, and then you sort of ended the conversation saying, oh, I don't know, it's probably just me. But I actually agree with you on the fact that consumption is getting quicker and quicker. But I don't listen to a music streaming service. I actually buy the albums still. And plus, the artist gets more money for doing that. And plus, you don't keep the music. I know these are really simplistic arguments, but the feel of it, like I could go onto my computer anytime and just listen to a David Bowie album, for example, or Miles Davis, and I've got it forever. And I don't understand how people can pay like the equivalent of an album each month and then say, oh, money's tight this month, I'm not going to invest in it, and then it's all gone. And all the music you got used to, that behavior of just the accessibility is just gone. And it's like, I can't deal with that. So I've got to buy albums, take my time with it.
Yeah, it's tricky for me because I love, like, I use Tidal, and I think I pay like $12 to $15 a month or something like that. And for me, I consume so much music. It's like a deal where it's like I'm paying for the price of one album and I get all the albums. But the thing is, it's like I'm renting music, because if I turn off the service, I no longer have the music, But I still have that problem with all digital music because it's all like in files on my computer. Like there was something about having a record or a CD that I really liked, and you don't get that with digital music. You know, I love that it's so compressed and you can put it in your phone. That's awesome, you know. But I don't know. I'm kind of stuck in the middle between digital music and
Okay.
hard copies of music. I think I love hard copies more, but I love the accessibility of digital music.
Yeah. I mean, if I had the space and the time, I'd switch back to LPs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But
But
then, you
there we are.
know, then
Yeah.
I
Go
don't
on.
know. Like, do you drive?
No.
Okay. Well, like,
Can't drive in Hong Kong. It's too expensive.
okay. Well, I loved having music in my vehicle, so and I drive a lot. So CDs skip, they get scratched. You know, that never happens with my digital music. Bluetooth, you know, me and my wife can share. I don't know. I don't mean to get into a music conversation, but I love music, and like I said, at the beginning and end of every episode, I do that thing called the playlist shuffle. And I just go to one of my playlists and hit shuffle, and whatever comes up comes up, and it's nice, like a fun way to kind of bring in the episode and take it out.
Yeah. Yeah. I get it. I get it. I used to. I used to make episodes where the music would be in the background consistently for the entire episode.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like subversive. Like you can hear us talking about bananas, and the song would be about bananas or something.
Oh, so it's really intentional.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I would do. But then it just took too much work to find all the tracks, and then each episode it has to be different. I was like, I'll just do an intro, just like an intro jingle, and that's it.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to pick up on was your outro, which I suppose will get us back into the meaty discussion. And it was you were saying like you were adding a disclaimer saying, okay, so I need to bring people on here that I don't necessarily agree with. And I don't know whether it was just me just taking it a little bit personally, but I was thinking, what did we actually disagree on? Because I thought I was just explaining or just providing insight at the moment. We haven't disagreed on anything.
No, not really. Because if we're being honest, so like most people I have on the podcast, kind of they're American, obviously. So,
Yeah.
and they're of like-minded thinking, and I would say you're there. It's just I believe you're coming at it from a completely different perspective, and so whether it's disagreeing or coming off as disagreeing, or it could be just the way we're talking about it. For the listener, can you hear me?
Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, for the listener, I don't know how they're interpreting our conversation. I don't know if they're like, are they debating each other? Are they agreeing? Yeah, because I don't think we had any like huge disagreements about anything that I can recall. But that's the whole thing. Like I'm even that way in life, and some people might say that I am more agreeable with people, and I wouldn't say I'm agreeable. I would say that I'm open to listening to your point of view, and then we'll talk about it. But I don't like to hit people over the head with my points of views and opinions. So if you're saying something that I don't necessarily agree with, I'm not going to be like, "Hey, John, that was a shitty thing you said," unless it's like really shitty, So I'm going to kind of let you say your piece, and then I might come back and say whatever it is I'm saying or what my thinking is. So I'm like that way in life. I'm like that way with people and on the podcast, because you're not the only person that I've talked to that didn't have the exact kind of same views as me. But my podcast has mostly been people who have different points of view that are different from mine. I wouldn't say necessarily disagree with my points of view. They just have different points of view. Like I'll have on like Hispanic women or a Muslim person, and we all kind of think the same way as far as humanity is concerned. But we come at it from different angles, right? and points of views, and that might be where we are. I'm not sure. We'll see.
Okay. Some of the basically before I move on. Okay, I understand that position a bit more, but I'm also feeling like you might get the heat. Like some people can outwardly attack a host, maybe not yet, but just because you bring someone on, they think you support their views, and I guess that's why you was trying to do that disclaimer of sorts. Like, I just want people with different opinion on. You can't live in an echo chamber.
Yeah, and we're being honest. I need to do that with every guest because I've gotten in conversations with people on the podcast where people assumed my point of view was the other person, was the guest point of view, like you just said. And so I need to do that more. And I think it's important to do that because I want to show people that it's okay to have different points of view. You know, like we don't have to debate in a combative way. We can talk through it. And it's obviously easier said than done. But most people kind of regress to like fighting and combat and name calling and, you know, all that stuff. And so I need to point out more that I like to talk to people that have different points of view than me to show how we can find some middle ground. So
Okay.
that's not exclusive to you. That's with a lot of people.
Okay, two things I wanted to clarify from last week, just listening to the episode, was one about the bluntness, not specifically to me this time, but you asked me whether Hong Kong people were blunt. And something I didn't explain was because most people here will speak to me in the second language, they actually do become blunt in a way because they just want to get to the point, but they're not trying to be because there's no nuance with the way they use English. Like I can choose to be nuanced if I wanted to, or I can just get to the point, whereas they have to get to the point here. So again, like when I brought up that issue of the American who got upset in Japan, there are things that people do to get to the point so much, like excuse me, I told you I was just eating breakfast before you started. A lot of people will say I'm boring in Hong Kong. They'll say I'm boring, and it's like, what do you mean you're boring? And it took me a few statements to get it, but what they meant was they're bored. They don't understand the ed and the ing, and it's adults and children who will say I'm boring.
Yeah.
Right. It's just it's examples like that, or they just nod their head to say yes, and you're looking for a longer answer. I had a guy come and take my old fridge, and they environmentally dispose of it. And I said, "Where are you? So what happens with the fridge? Where do you take it?" And because he spoke to me in English, I'm assuming he's fluent in English. And he said, "We take it." Yeah, but what do you do with it? We dispose of it. And it's like, oh, okay. This guy doesn't obviously know enough to be able to articulate it in English. And then, in addition to that, I was on a job last week where I had to fly a drone, and I had to go near the Chinese border, and we had to basically do some video reconnaissance of this area. And we were being guided by these village elders who own the land. It's not the government who owns the land, it's the village people. And there was 5 people in the group, and I was the only English speaker, the native English speaker. And I had a guy who was basically internationally educated in Vancouver and New York, and he was Chinese. And if I didn't ask him any questions, they wouldn't have explained anything to me, because they just don't think about explaining it. And I've been in various social situations repeatedly where I'm at a dinner table and everyone speaks in Chinese. They won't accommodate the English speaker. They won't consciously accommodate me, and so I'll just won't turn up to certain social engagements because I don't want to be the bad guy, or I don't want to be the hassle, so to speak. It's like, if you're speaking Cantonese, why should I be there? And I don't mean that in a spiteful way. It's just like, why should you all accommodate me? The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few in this case, to quote Spock. And so I'll just excuse myself. But on that particular hiking trip, because we didn't know, my boss didn't know, and he was with me, because he just said, "Oh, we're just going to fly it over this jungle part." And I was like, okay, but then 20 minutes later we're still hiking, and it's like, we could have just flown the drone 20 minutes around without hiking. And he didn't know, but because he didn't know, and he was being spoken to, he didn't care to relay that information to me. So they don't think about in a group speaking English at all. But it's not a rudeness. It's just what they're comfortable with and what they do. Whereas if you go to Germany, the Germans will switch to English to accommodate me. That's my experience.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Right. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to add that flavor. And the other one was me saying black people, and you were saying that's kind of blunt. Something that I wish I mentioned last week was some further context to that, is that, and maybe this can kickstart our conversation about race and perceptions and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The term African Americans, I, as a non-American, find that offensive to black people,
Mm-hmm.
because it creates a distinction between a group of Americans and another group, which is the white group, which doesn't get the white Americans treatment. So that means that they are Americans by default, and then black Americans and the other type of Americans that are being used as words to group a group of people are now the other.
You're absolutely right.
So, yeah, so some Americans will say, to me, why don't you use black Americans? And I have to explain on Periscope when I was using Periscope. And it's like, no, it's offensive. I feel it's offensive. Other black people have said it's offensive. And I'm not going to use that. But I did say last week, black Africans. But black Africans, you're from a continent. And there are, people who aren't white or black in a continent. And I think you have to kind of make that distinction, especially if I'm comparing a group of black people to another group of black people. I don't know. Thoughts? Let's start this.
Yeah. So this is the thing that I've been kind of gathering, because I've been listening to you talk about this topic on Twitter with me, like through the messaging and stuff. And I've been listening to all the videos you've been sending me.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah. And because I'm trying to understand your point of view on this topic. And I think I'm slowly kind of understanding what you're saying.
But do you want to give context to the listeners, though, who I've shared?
I don't know the guy's name.
Oh, okay. So his name is Eric D. July, and he's a black libertarian.
Mm-hmm.
He calls himself a black libertarian as well, just because he has a podcast and he talks about, obviously, his take on racial issues in America. But okay, go on. Sorry.
No, so like I agree with some of the things he says, and I disagree with some of the things he says.
Okay.
And like with your point of view, which I would assume is similar to his, I agree with some of it, and I disagree with other parts of it. So like it sounds like what I'm hearing is, I think we're ultimately, me and you, for example, are on the same page as far as the treatment of humans, right? We both believe all people should be treated equally.
Yeah.
Right? And so you just pointed out how black people in the United States are called African Americans. And then if you have, Asian people here, they're Asian Americans or Chinese Americans or, Hispanic Americans. But white people are just called Americans. And that's absolutely wrong, because it signifies that, like you said, all the people of color are other. Right? Is that what you were saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
White are the default.
White are real Americans and everybody else is other. So yeah, that's wrong. And I've made that point, even way before I've talked to you about it with other people, to point out how white supremacy plays its role, or one of the ways it plays its role in American culture. And so the issue with that is, it's not black and white for me, because although that's wrong to do that, by just calling us Americans and not acknowledging that we are African or black Americans, it's almost as if people are trying to unintentionally sweep away all the issues that come with being an African American. And if you sweep away the issue, then you're not resolving those issues. You're just prolonging those issues because you're not dealing with them. It's almost like, for me, as if like you're in a relationship with someone and you have some kind of issue with your spouse or the person you're dating, and rather than dealing with the issue, you just kind of gloss over it and say, well, that's wrong, we should do this differently or call it something else. You still haven't gotten rid of the issue. So if that makes any sense, that's kind of the overall like argument I have with things like what that guy was saying. And it might be somewhat of your point of view. Like, I understand we should be treated equally, but we still have to acknowledge the differences, because there are so many like severe repercussions and consequences because of those differences. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so what do you think about that?
Well, watching Eric D. July, he sort of brought me into, and I've only just started subscribing to him, by the way.
Uh-huh.
But I've been binge watching his videos, especially with his takes on comic books, and then race has come second. But he's brought a level of nuance to an ongoing conversation that has obviously been going on in America for a long time, and I never realized this extra level of nuance. And so again, I have no stick in the game, if that's the phrase, because I'm not living in America. So part of me says, why should I even concern myself with this as an issue? Because I'm just basically on another planet with regard to this. But I'm also actually fascinated, and I do feel sometimes that if there's a social change in America, it sets a standard. Even though the perception of America is turning negative. If, like, let's say, for example, if America pulled its finger out, and when I mean America, I mean the government, they pulled their finger out and said, listen, we're going to try and fix this climate change in 5 years. We're going to mobilize like we mobilized in World War II. If they did that, everybody on the planet would also mobilize behind that, and we could solve this problem far quicker. But because the Republican Party are just being such assholes, we all get to suffer. So they sort of set a trend. They set a standard that people do look up to. They do look up to America for certain things. But at the same time, the problems that are in America are sometimes exclusively belonging to America. So there's this double-edged sword where even I am looking up to America for some sort of hope or guidance, and it's actually just maybe some tech companies that are doing it instead, or some flamant. I can't say it. Flamant. People with a lot of money who give money away. Flamant. PH. Philanthropists. Do you know? Yeah?
Yeah.
I'm an English teacher, would you believe? And I can't even say that. Philanthropists. There we go. Got it. Yeah. And so you've got individuals doing it rather than the whole. It's really weird because I don't have to get involved.
No,
or don't have to be sidelined and just watch or spectate. That's the word. Spectate.
But John, don't forget your thought. I'm happy you do that because
yes. That's the other thing.
Just beyond being looking up to America, but just as a human being, I love that you're doing that. I love that you're doing that because more people need to behave that way, thinking outside of themselves. So I applaud that.
Okay, thank you. There are people on Periscope who would say, yes, we want your opinion. But then equally, there are just as many who say, you're not in America, you don't understand what it's like. I got blocked last week on Twitter by somebody who basically said that because I was just making a point about those children who died along the border in these concentration camps. And there's this whole conversation about whether these are concentration camps. And they are. I believe they are. Certain people believe they are. But if AOC believes they are, then people get upset and say, oh, she should go back to bartending. She doesn't know anything. And it's like, this is not constructive. But they are concentration camps. It's just that they're not being gassed yet. But the gassing is not what makes it a concentration camp. It's the fact that you just concentrate a group of people there and lock them up against their will and against the law of the land.
I agree.
And people want to make these distinctions and say, no, what we had in Nazi Germany, that was a concentration camp and that was a default. So when we get to that and we start gassing people, then we'll call it a concentration camp, but then we're on your side. But they came here illegally, and so.
But I feel like they would even justify them being gassed. I feel like they would say, well, they're criminals and so they deserve this. It's this cognitive dissonance kind of thing.
Yeah, but what's sad is that the government says something's illegal, and then they'll say, yeah, it's illegal. And it's the government that is defining people as, you know, illegal immigrants coming to America. But then what gets lost inside that is that there are people legitimately looking for asylum.
Yeah.
And the people also who are complaining and saying, oh, you're draining resources from my taxes to pay for all this crap. Don't bring your children. America has made it quite clear that if you bring your children, you're going to have trouble. So the government is using it as a deterrent, the idea that children are going to be separated from parents. But it's not working because people are desperate. But people don't understand their desperation. And so we lack a lot of empathy straight from the beginning of this issue. They just see illegal immigrants because immigrants are bad. All forms of immigrants are bad. And there's a large enough amount of people there who are just like, no, stop taking our tax dollars to fund these things. But at the same time, there are billionaires who don't pay their tax. And there's that old story about, there's 11 cookies on the plate, and there's a rich white man, a white man, and a black man. And the rich white man takes 10 of the cookies and then tells the white man, be careful, that black man might take your cookie. And that's what's happening. And it happens every single day, but in America, especially around the world, but it's magnified in America because American news, dominates. And it just blows my mind that people are, blaming the black man when it's the rich white man who takes more, whatever it is. He's taking more, but we're upset at the black man. And that's why it goes back to this other conversation where I said to you, I believe it's about class, not race.
Okay. So hang on to that thought.
Yes.
There are like we would come right back there. It's not even like you said, the immigration. It's people of color immigration because it's happening on the Canadian border, and quote unquote white people are doing it from other countries, but it's not. There's no fuss. It's the brown people.
Right.
So one of the questions I have for you, because I'm genuinely curious here, because you talk about this class issue, and it sounds like you have a understanding of the game as far as what these rich oligarchs do with people of color and white people. As far as, like you said, the black person is going to take your cookies. So I agree there is a class issue, but I also believe there's a huge race issue. I don't think you have one without the other. So one of the questions I guess I have is when you talk about it being a class issue, kind of what I hear in my head is you're dismissing the race issue.
In certain examples, yes, because let's back up a bit. Do you think everything is about race?
No.
Right, okay. So we're allowed some ambiguity in this conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, so for me, a lot of people, I think making it a race issue is an easier concept for a lot of people to understand, especially if you're going to be upset by immigrants, or whether it's white people upset at black people or black people upset at white people because of past atrocities. I'll call them an atrocity. And so there are still people calling for reparations, black people calling for reparations, which I think there was a podcast yesterday I listened to, the Joe Rogan one, and he had Abby Martin on. And part of me thought, that's crazy. How can you have reparations for something that happened like 200 years ago, regarding slavery? But then they pointed out that, well, in America, they're still paying reparations to war veterans or the descendants of war veterans from the Civil War. And it's like, hang on, so the government can pay money to the war veterans, but they can't pay money to black people. And I was like, wow, totally changed my mind on that.
Well, because, yeah, I mean, and the thing is,
I still don't know how you could calculate those kind of reparations, but the fact that there's doing it for one group of people and not another does sort of negate the point that it can't be done.
Well, this is the thing with the reparations, and I don't want to get too far down this, so I don't want to lose our train of thought. You're saying, how do you calculate that? And if this is kind of maybe what you're talking about, like determining who gets it and how much, I couldn't tell you how much, but I could tell you who gets it. And I could tell you it'd be every black person in the country. And the reason I would say that is because we all feel the effects of it.
Yeah, and I agree.
It doesn't, why would it matter? Because, like, let's say you didn't have, let's say you have black ancestors that came here free and they were exploring or whatnot and they were never slaves. But those descendants still feel the same effects
Yes.
that a slave did or a descendant of a slave did. We still have Jim Crow. We still have segregation. We still have civil rights, you know. And I just pointed this out the other day. I have a photo of my great-grandparents who were slaves.
Wow.
And so people make it seem like it's this thing that was so long ago. I'm like, yo, that's like 2 people
Yeah.
away from me. Well, maybe 3. My parents, her parents, their parents. There's 3 people. That's not long ago.
No, it's not.
But but like I said, I don't want to get down the whole reparation because I feel like it's a great conversation to have.
Let's rewind a bit. So we're talking about class and race. Was you making a point? And then we talked about reparations?
Well, yeah, I was asking you, you know, in your point of view, are you dismissing, you know, the race issue and saying it's not a thing, it's just class?
Okay, so the 3 things actually, because one of them will be an example, is that 1, I do believe people who are obviously upset and traumatized by issues of race will continue to find other issues regarding race. There are those people out there, and they'll make everything about race. 2, there's a man in the UK, and he's a child of an immigrant. He's a Conservative MP. I think his name is Sajid David. I can't remember, but he is a person of color, we should say, just to be polite to him, and he is actively working against other immigrants coming to the country. And he's 1 generation from being an immigrant himself because his parents are immigrants. And people are pointing out that, because you're a part of the Conservative Party, and the Conservatives, if you don't know, they all typically go to the same school, Eton. If you've ever heard of it, Eton, or maybe Oxford or Cambridge. They're all, you know, upper class, highly educated, and then they all just join the Conservative Party. Whereas the Labour Party, which is the biggest opposition, is more of a working class, union-backed party. So they are more likely to, you know, implement policies that are kinder to the majority of the people living in the UK. So what's the issue? What is it there? You speaking as another person of color. What is the issue there? What do you think that is when there is a man who's basically working against other people who don't have white skin? And he's in a party that is considered more right-wing than the other parties, and has elements of anti-Semitism and racism, and he's part of it. So how can it be about race when he is part of it? And you can't. And some people might say, yeah, well, he's just a useful monkey. To use an expression, excuse me. We'll get onto that as well, this idea of a monkey. What is it?
So
you've got him in American government. You've got Candace Owens, not in government, but you've got Ben Carson. He's part of the Trump administration.
Okay,
and
so
then you've got people who support. Yeah, go on.
Okay, so you're asking how a person of color does something like this, right?
Yes.
Okay.
How do they actively work against their own sort of people or their own background, previous background?
I think there's a lot of answers to that question. I think the first answer is something I learned not too long ago. How should I say this? And I don't want to mess this up. How can let's take a straight white man, and a straight white man who is what's the word for men who don't like women, and I mean misogynist, right? How can a misogynistic man marry a woman?
Well, isn't it about power?
If a misogynistic man who does not respect women and treats them like shit, how can that guy marry a woman?
Upbringing, part of his upbringing. I'm just guessing here, but
Yeah.
part of it is also a convoluted understanding of what it is to be with a woman. But he
That
also gets to own one.
that's the same difference. The same way a person of color can work against themselves or support something that is not in their favor. It happens all the time. I think people just get this distinction in their head that, well, how can a black person support this thing if and this thing be racist if a black person is doing it? I'm like, it happens every day. You have misogynistic men who marry women all the time. Like, this sort of thing happens all the time. You just don't think
But
of it because it's so common with misogynistic men and women.
I get your point, but a single misogynistic man doesn't sort of create any agendas or drive any agendas with a relationship to a larger group of people, unless he goes to like somewhere where there's like a group and you can just type on the internet with other misogynists. Whereas a politician
don't they?
has. Pardon? I
But
don't know. I don't know how a misogynist works, but
mhm,
I get what you're saying, but I think like a politician
mhm.
has an agenda, or politicians have agendas, and then they work also in the confines of groupthink.
Well, white men are currently in the United States trying to pass laws that lessen women's rights,
Right?
and
But they're not
that's
women,
a.
so
But you're saying it's not a woman. Well, you have
say
women
again.
you do have women who support those laws that are trying to be passed and have passed.
Yes.
That the
Again,
misogynistic
I
men
think they're
are
actively
trying to pass.
working. They're actively working to support their own. Again, they've othered. I mean, there's different types of othering, but I think they've othered themselves away from those who will be harmed by the groups. Because if you're rich, just like that, there was a American politician who went to Canada for healthcare treatment. Some guy on the Republican side, and people pointed it out because they have healthcare, socialized healthcare in Canada.
Hmm.
They can get access to things that they don't want you to have access to.
So you're saying the rich white politicians have separated themselves from the working class white people they're harming.
I wouldn't say just rich whites, because there are rich blacks.
Mm-hmm.
Like I say, this particular politician has certainly detached himself from the needs of many, and he's implemented policies that won't directly affect him. So he's raising up the drawbridge on certain entitlements, and so I think some of it is part of the group that you're in. You know that phrase, "You are your 5 best friends."
Mm-hmm.
So I honestly believe that his 5 best friends are just racist pieces of crap, but they all happen to be white. But he's accepted somehow, maybe because his background is similar as theirs, and that they've accepted him on some level. But again, it goes back to those individuals, and you were saying, well, a misogynist will still marry a woman,
Mm-hmm.
but then it's about power and control, isn't it? Then maybe they're using him. Am I using it properly if I say Uncle Tom?
Yeah, you can say Uncle Tom.
Right, okay. They're using him as an Uncle Tom, and they might not communicate. They might be doing that subconsciously, or they might be saying, "Oh, we can get the coloured vote or the black vote, whatever it is that's happening."
So
So he's just a useful idiot, isn't he? But he doesn't. He probably doesn't. He's not none the wiser.
well, that's another part of the my response is that you have a thing such as self-hate, and then you have just idiots.
Okay.
As
What
far as
about?
black people working against themselves, or people
Okay,
voting
so
against their own interest.
explain. And I mean this because I obviously don't know. I don't know enough about American culture, so you need to explain this to me. So how does it work with regard to, say, Kanye and Candace Owens, who are kind of getting the limelight as black people supporting a racist president or a racist administration?
I can't speak to Candace Owens because I don't know a lot about her. But Kanye, yeah. If I get what you're saying. If I gather what you're saying, as far as you're saying, it's a class issue, right?
Right.
I understand that point and that thinking, but the thing that I think those rich black people always learn, and this train is never late, is let me back up. You know Jay-Z.
Yeah, I've heard of
Okay,
him.
Jay-Z Jay-Z's got this song called The Story of OJ. It's a magnificent song. It's on his 444 album. Have you heard it?
About orange juice or O.J. Simpson?
OJ Simpson.
Okay.
And you know what? Let me just get the lyrics here because I don't want to mess this up. Story of OJ lyrics. Man, Google's fast. Okay, the lyrics are this, or this is the chorus: light nigga, dark nigga, faux nigga, real nigga, rich nigga, po nigga, house nigga, field nigga, still nigga.
Wow.
So basically, what he's saying is no matter what level of black you are, rich or poor, you're still a nigga. And we see that play out in American culture all the time, where rich black people in that higher class get the rug pulled out from underneath them. And they always fall to race issues. And the rich white people always go after them. Whether it's LeBron James, O.J. Simpson, Ben Carson, shit's probably coming for him too. Where Will Smith, like, it always happens to them. No matter where they go, they never will fit in because they're black. They're never going to be accepted. They may be able to venture in and enjoy some of that lifestyle and that class, but at the end of the day, they can get shot by a racist cop the same way I can get shot by a racist cop. And that's kind of where I come back into the race issue. You can't escape it. No matter what class you're in, it's still an issue. Does that make
Okay.
any sense, or is that kind of all over the place a little bit?
Yes, but then have they? But then why are they actively? I mean, they must read the news,
Mm-hmm.
or are they so much in a bubble that the news doesn't reach their heads?
Well,
That they're working against, their own.
Well, I don't know. I want to make sure that I clarify those examples. Like, I know Ben Carson's one of them. I think Ben Carson's an idiot. I mean, I know he's a surgeon, but like him, for example, like running the secretary, I think HUD, the Department of Urban Development or something like that, Housing and Urban Development. Why would he accept that job if he has no experience in that job? I think he's a greedy idiot because he's currently messing up the system. There's a lot of people in the Trump organization that shouldn't be in the jobs that they're in. Like if you had a brain, you wouldn't accept those jobs because you're not qualified for those jobs. I'm just making the fact that I don't think these are intelligent people. They're greedy people because they're in there trying to get the money and enrich themselves. But like LeBron James, for example, who's very outspoken against Donald Trump and the Republican Party, he's not doing anything that works against. He's speaking out against racism and class issues all the time. Because he just had, I think, like not recently, but he had like somebody spray painted nigger all over his like front gate and stuff. And this is like LeBron James, like this is the highest black athlete maybe in the world, and he still gets hit by the race issue.
Mm. Have you seen that film, The Green Book?
No, I haven't seen it, but I've heard some things about it.
Oh, okay. Because there's a scene where, because he's like a famous pianist, famous like musician,
Mm-hmm.
and he plays the piano at a southern residence, and all the white people are enamored with him, and they think it's amazing, and he's got one of the best pianos in the world, and he wants to go to the toilet. Because of his lifestyle, he's still there?
Yeah.
Okay. Because of his lifestyle, he's accustomed to using the same toilets as white people, and he tries to go to the toilet, and they're like, "Where are you going?" He says, "Oh, I just want to use the bathroom." And he says, "No, you have to use the one outside." And it brings it back to him that, oh, he's not really fully accepted. He's seen as like a novelty, maybe, or a curiosity, because they're amazed by, his ability to play the piano just because he's black.
Right.
So he becomes exceptional. And they're not rude to him in any sort of way. They're still polite and cordial to him, even at the point of saying you're not using that toilet. They're still polite to him, but it's rudeness. It comes from a position of ignorance, and it obviously upsets him. And while the story was criticized for being too happy-go-lucky with its source material, but it does make me think: is that happening? Up until Kanye or someone like Candace Owens wants to use the toilet, they won't have any problems. And so they think they're accepted. They think they're changing people's minds inside an administration. Not so much, yours or my minds, because, I don't think highly of them anyway, purely on the things that they've said.
Mm-hmm.
But you haven't seen that scene, so. But I think you get it anyway.
Yeah. So
because it supports maybe an idea that, see, we're not racist. How can we be racist if Kanye loves Trump and Candace Owens is right wing? How can we be racist? And they're trying to use it as a very thin veneer to deflect any sort of criticism that the American left, the American right, is racist.
Yeah, there's this. I can't tell you how insulting that is. For example, because Republicans have done this, and I've had white people in my life do it. Say, look, I'm not racist because I have a black friend. I'm not racist because I have a black spouse. I'm not racist because I have a mixed kid. The only thing
I'm not racist because I've got friend requests from black people on Facebook.
Yeah, whatever that is. The only thing that proves you're not racist is not being racist. That's the only thing. So to march a black person in front of me and say, look, this is my black person, I'm not racist, that's even more racist to me. That's maddening.
That's the very first episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
No, I haven't seen that show. I hear about it though.
Oh, I mean, they're making a joke, and he isn't actually a racist. He's just misconstrued as being a racist, and he takes this black girl on a date, and she's into him, and he takes her to the coffee shop, and he's in love with the coffee shop lady. And he's like, "Now, this is my friend, he says, my African American friend, my lovely African American friend." And she's like, "Right, okay." And he's like, "Well, I'm on a date with her," and she's like, "Right." And she's getting obviously upset because he's pestering her. And he says, "Well, now that you know I'm not a racist, can I get your phone number?" It's like, oh my god, this guy.
Yeah,
what an idiot.
Yeah, there's almost nothing more insulting than doing that. That's a highly ignorant thing to do.
I'm not doing it justice, but you should watch that first episode. If you're gonna watch one, you should watch the very first one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. My brother-in-law always talks about that show. So yeah, the only thing that proves you're not racist is not being racist. The only thing that proves you're not a misogynist is not being misogynist. It's your actions, and that's how you can have black people who work against black people. You can have black people who are racist against themselves. Self-hate is a real thing. And then you also have racial fetishes. I've done a lot of episodes about this, where you'll have white men, for example, who like Asian women. You'll have white men who are attracted to black women. That doesn't mean they're not racist. It just means that's what they like sexually. You know what I mean? The only thing that proves you're not racist is not being racist. I can't iterate that enough to those people who do those kind of things. So.
But then are these people of color being racist?
Yeah.
The ones who are in support of a white government, whether it's the UK or whether it's the American current administration.
Yeah.
Are they being racist towards their own?
Yeah.
And you don't see that as a class thing.
Well, yeah, it is a class thing. But the thing is, I think they think they're benefiting from that, and they might be enjoying some, immediate monetary gain from that decision. But I think long term, all they're doing is they're hurting themselves and their children.
Okay, but then that idea of chasing the money, does that come? Which is coming first? Are they doing it? Are they being racist to get the money, or are they getting the money, which in turn makes them out to be Uncle Toms, which is a form of racism, self-hate? Like, which one's coming first? That's what interests me. That's why I'm careful to say, is it about class or is it about race? I mean, what's the primary motivation? Which one's coming first, the chicken or the egg?
Well, I would say, in order for a human being to do that to another human being, where you're hurting them by your policies or the things, your behaviors and the things you do. In order for a human being to do that to another human being, you have to be a certain kind of human. You have to be a shitty person, in my opinion.
Okay.
So
that I can agree with.
I think, their pursuit. I mean, I don't know that you could really say it's one or the other. I think it could be either or. It could be they're born, because you have this all the time where you have people born into a class. You can have black people born into a class and they're not aware of the issues that other black people face because they're in a somewhat position of privilege because they're born into a rich family, a rich black family.
Should they get involved?
I think they should, because let's say that their financial situation changes.
Okay.
What's the end game? You know what I mean? Like, if your financial situation changes and now you're not rich anymore, now you have to hang out with the rest of us, how are you going to get treated? You should have fought for what you should have fought for what was right, for the equality of all human beings.
But then, if you look at it, if you're looking at, some people might be looking at it purely on terms of race, and they can have a negative reaction to my interest or positive reaction to my interest. But like, if you think of it as a spectrum, you're saying, I'm at the beginning saying was, why should the black person get involved, because they're of a different position and they've never experienced hardship. But then I'm also in the same position as him, in the sense that, I'm middle class, but by myself, because I've made sacrifices. I can afford different things, so I'm not lower class. But then I'm also white. So am I always anchored or not anchored or expected? Or are the same expectations not placed on me like they are on him? Because, as Jay-Z says, they're all typically, still the N-word.
Yeah, because it's the right thing to do.
Okay. But then what about me then?
It's the right thing to do. Let me ask you this, John. If you were walking down the street and you saw an infant baby in the middle of the street, would you not run and go get that baby out the street?
Yeah, of course.
Why?
Because it's the right thing to do. To use a great man's words.
Like, people who aren't upset about the children at the border, who I've had people say some pretty insensitive things to me about it. And I'm like, imagine that's your family. Imagine that's, a relative or a friend of yours. Imagine that's your kid. No, that's horrible. You should be concerned about that because those are other human beings. And now I think some people have this idea that, well, they're like, it's so far away from me, I can't do anything. You could do something. Like, me and my wife, we donate money to ACLU. And there's another organization, and they have lawyers who go represent the immigrants. There's always a little something you can do. And there's a lot of issues in the United States and the world, there's always something that you can do to make somebody's situation better. It's just having that kind of empathy. When you see a homeless person begging on the corner, if you got $1, give them $1, get something. So it's just having empathy, is how I look at it. It's the right thing to do. And, I don't know if you're religious. I'm not.
No, I'm not.
I do believe in God, but I'm not like religious. I'm not a Christian or anything. So if you believe there's a judgment day, there's some motivation for you. What'd you do?
I don't. Well, I don't believe in. Well, the right, the political right, is linked to religion, and if they actually believe the things that they were saying, then they would be kinder people. They do seem to cherry pick the Bible
Yeah, I'm glad you
to
pointed that
ridiculous
out.
amounts, and it's too easy to sort of own them on Twitter when they say stupid shit, because they don't believe in it. They're using it as a way to sort of corral other people, I believe. More simple-minded people who do believe it. It's just a form of control.
Yeah.
Or a way to form of control. Keep it up. I'll just keep it there like that.
Yeah. So
I have another example for you if you want to move on. Or
no, I was going to go back to class.
okay, no, but I'm still trying to find nuance in this idea of race or class. And what you're saying, if you just say be a nice person, then it kind of like sidesteps this idea that, well, it's you're just a shitty person. But then how you perceive yourself is wholly subjective, and so obviously there are some people, whether they're black or white, they do believe they're doing good things, and that it take a lot of effort to shake them from their sort of ideology. Just like this particular MP in the UK who thinks he's doing good things, or he's just. But then good, like for example, if you're saying, don't be a shitty person, he might think, well, if more people come to this country, then fewer people in the UK have opportunities because the immigrants are taking the opportunities from our people, so to speak, even though he's not white.
Mm-hmm.
So from his point of view, he is doing a good thing, isn't he? That's the problem with. I mean, I get behind what you're saying.
Yeah, because
it seems that everybody
kind of subjective.
Yeah, but it seems that everybody who has a position of power is corrupted, and as they say, power corrupts, and it just seems to be consistent. There's only a few people politically that I know of who don't try to harm anybody, and objectively, they are trying to not harm anybody. Whereas these people are probably can make an argument and say, well, we don't want them here because we don't have enough jobs, we don't have enough housing. So, why should they get all this stuff for free? And the natives have worked hard for their, social credit for other people to take it. So they make this moral argument, and they honestly believe it.
Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking about how to understand this class and race conversation, and in my head, it's almost like, let's say class is a car engine.
The what? A car engine.
Okay.
A
car engine. And racism is the fuel.
This is another Matthew Sky analogy.
It's the fuel that drives the engine. It's kind of how I think about it in my head. You can't have one without the other. You need the fuel for the engine.
But if I want to take your analogy further, let's pretend you need don't pretend, you do need an ignition to light up that car. What is the ignition? Is it media representation? Is it perpetuated stereotypes? Is it misunderstanding?
It's driving. It's gonna be whatever. It's gonna be how, like, when those two things collide, like there's a reaction, like you said, the ignition, like there's a spark, something's happening. It's gonna be whatever that incident is in my head. It could be slavery. It could be a police shooting. It's gonna be an event. Something that points it out, right?
Yes, but then if the event is being misrepresented, then that isn't what it appears to be, is it?
What do you
it's
mean?
Not wholly about other people saying, "Well, that's racist." So,
how do you mean? Like it could be misrepresented? Like what you're saying?
Okay, so take a white supremacist for example. Again, the Joe Rogan episode yesterday was talking about Richard Spencer, and he's not getting so much media attention now. And he's gone to rallies, and there's literally like 10 people turning up. And there are elements inside U.S. society and outside, let's say the Russians, who are sowing the seeds of discontent and making something about something, and it probably doesn't exist. I don't know how much you have known about this, and this sounds like really whack, but there are Facebook pages that will take the position of the black man in America, and then there are other pages that will take the position of, say, Southerners who want to succeed from the United States. Let's say Texans, and they create these Facebook groups, and then they build up an audience because they look American. They look like real Americans are having these issues, and then they hold these rallies in the same place opposite one another, and they've talked about it many times on the Joe Rogan podcast. So this is my only source for it, directly about this example that I'm talking about. So there are elements outside of America that are trying to interfere with the society, the fabric of society inside of America, because they know that Americans generally have a binary take on many issues, and if you can upset enough people, then they can believe certain things are happening in their country when they're not. So Richard Spencer, the media don't really focus on him anymore. He goes to these rallies and no one turns up because basically he's a nobody, but the media gave him a platform to make him somebody, and then people get upset and say this Richard Spencer, he's got to get punched every single time he's in public. But who is he? He's a nobody. He's manufactured.
I hear
so
what you're saying.
It perpetuates an ongoing argument that probably doesn't need to exist. It's just that the media will still play up issues of race so that people are continually upset at each other. Again, the white man with that one cookie versus the black man.
So yeah, I hear what you're saying. I don't think there are a lot of us, by us I mean black people and white people, who are humane, that are very well aware of the numbers. Like Trump lost the election, if we're being honest. By like a million or plus something votes. He won
the popular vote.
Yeah, he won by the Electoral College, which is a whole nother conversation, and that's got a lot of gerrymandering involved in it. We know that the numbers on these people are very, very, very few.
What do you mean numbers?
On the racist, the extremist, the neo-Nazis, we know there's like 10 of these guys, right? The extremists, and I'm exaggerating. We know there's not a lot of them, right? But what there are a lot of are innocent, uninformed white people. And
just for a second, but do you believe that there are also the equal type of person on the black side?
Sure.
Okay. I just want to,
Yeah.
Someone might be listening and say, Jonathan, why don't you just, point that out?
Yeah. There are a lot of, uninformed, innocent white people, and I'll use my wife for example. I think the most dangerous form of racism is the most subtle form of racism. It's not the overt Nazi. It's when you go to the mall and Santa Claus is white. That's the most powerful form of racism and white supremacy.
But, sorry, this could get into another whole topic, but if Santa Claus is white and he's been white forever, in one sense, and this goes back to Eric D. July, if you make it a black guy in that costume, isn't that just token representation?
I hear what you're saying, so let me get to that. Because the point I'm making is a little bit different from what he's saying. The point I'm making is that you go to the mall and Santa Claus is white.
Okay.
You turn on your TV and all the heroes are white. Die Hard, Bruce Willis, Steven Seagal, the Avengers. The majority of what you see of people in these positions of power are white. The doctors are white. The judges are white. The cops are white. The majority of the millionaires and billionaires are white. A lot of the executives are white. The numbers are starting to change over time, but that's the most powerful form of racism and white supremacy because it's the most subtle and it's not mean and it's not intentional. That, from my belief, it's considered normal. So my son, for example, he sees white characters in all of his cartoons. He then subconsciously begins to think white is normal. So when he sees himself in the mirror and his skin is darker, he's like, well, I'm not normal. I'm other. That's the most dangerous form of racism, in my opinion. And that's what gets a lot of people hurt in this country. Whether
yeah, go on. Sorry.
Yeah, whether it's a police officer policing someone, because you don't know where they're getting their information. You know, do they have any friends that are people of color? Are they getting their information from TV shows and movies where they show black people as gangsters and drug dealers? So when they see me walking down the street, they're like, hey, that's probably a bad person. Let me pull him over and check him out.
Okay, I just want to push back against that, what you said, because there's still a lot to unpack, and I didn't actually make my third point, but it's okay. I can hold on to it. Mm-hmm. You're talking about black representation for children, but at the same time, Eric D. I'm not going to quote everything from Eric D. July, but it's poignant because I only listened to him yesterday about it, and so I'm listening to two black people, and so you two have got a difference of opinion. But he's saying
he makes good points. I listened to his video.
Right. And I've also got my own interpretation of what you just said about children being underrepresented. But he's saying that children will play with anybody. They don't care, and they don't think about race until parents or the environment, another element of environment, interferes with that child's... Right, it's learned.
Yeah.
And so you're saying your child will grow up, but is he learning about this othering, because he is othering himself, is he learning that from you primarily? Because you've thought about this issue a lot, and so subconsciously somehow you're giving that to your child. Now, you can say, maybe I'm not, maybe I don't, maybe you are. I don't know your situation. Plus, you're in a different country to me. Mm-hmm. But when I was a child, I could watch Bruce Lee movies. I didn't other myself watching Bruce Lee. Now, you can say, well, it's because you're white, but at the same time, my background, we were lower middle class. My dad was divorced. We didn't have a lot of money. But when I saw Bruce Lee, I was like, wow, this fucking dude is amazing. I wish I could do, I would just call it karate when I was like 6. I never set myself up as an other to that person. Mm-hmm. So speaking from my own experience, I've always had Asian culture in my life because I used to live in Hong Kong as a baby. I was around Hong Kong people. Then my dad obviously watched Bruce Lee movies and all sorts of imported Asian movies. And so I've never got behind this idea entirely that you need black or you need Asian action stars to appeal to other people who aren't necessarily obviously of the race aspect that you're talking about. But at the same time, I do want to see. I'm not saying I don't want to see. I'm saying because Black Panther is amazing, but at the same time, Black Panther, for example, took a lot of money. But is it because all the black people went out and saw it? Or is it because it's a really good movie and everybody who's interested in comic books saw it? And even the media narrative would say, oh, it got the black people out. So does that mean that black people will only watch black people's movies? But that in itself is a form of racism. And supposedly then, there's an untapped potential here, so we need to make more black movies. When really, if you just make good movies, then everybody will see them. And you just try to be not strategic. What's the word I'm trying to think of? If you start defining who should be in a movie based on their skin, then it causes other problems. Whereas I think Hollywood, because we're off roughly the same age, Hollywood is of a different age. So different space, it comes from a different time. Watching movies as a child, the white people were in the majority. But are there Asian and black movie stars now that people can look up to? I would say yes, but at the same time, look at China. China only has Asian superstars. And no one says to China, hey, you should have more representation. Now, obviously, China is like 92% Asian. Mm-hmm. So I would say that, 92% of their movies should have Asian people in it. But in America, you can say, well, Americans, white people are still the majority, but then they've got that, what's the word? It's inertia. They've got this inertia thing going on where, yeah, there were white people hiring white people, and you've got to open it up. There's all sorts going on, but again, I don't believe wholly in this idea that if you grow up as a child and you see someone different, that you're going to sort of say, well, I'm not represented.
Well, I'll say this from personal experience, from my experience, being a person of color. When you grow up or when I grow up and that's what I see is white characters all the time. It messes with, and I'm being honest, you're just gonna have to take my word for it because this is just my personal experience.
No, well, yeah, I have to. I can't dismiss it. And again, I didn't remember the point clearly, but you live in a different environment, so it's going to have compound effects. No, cumulative effects.
You assign value to things in life, whether you do it, whether you're aware of it or not. And so, if all I see is white, and I don't see myself represented anywhere, you begin to look at yourself as different. I don't know that's something that somebody can teach you, but I think it's going to happen naturally over time because it happened to me, where I would look down on black people because I was surrounded by white people growing up in Columbus, Ohio. I go to Memphis, Tennessee, where there's a bunch of black people, and my world's like shocked. It's like it's like a 180, and I then begin to learn about self-value and self-worth. We're important too. Because believe it or not, like I go to a predominantly white school as a kid, those white kids treat me different. So I guess at the end of the day, kind of to your point about representation, to kind of cut through everything, if I could just maybe try to get to the point, I think the point is, or the issue is, this country, I'll speak about the United States, has opened up a can of worms, and they've never really dealt with it. And you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. You squirted it out, like, shit's out there. And it's so ingrained in society, you can't get around it. You're going to run into it anywhere you go, whether it's intentional or unintentional. You can't get away from it. Every single kid in this country is going to learn racism in one way or another because it's a part of American history. It's a part of our society. I'm going to see it when I walk out the door of my house. Like, it's so ingrained in everything that we do, you can't get away from it. And like I said, it's the most subtle ways that a lot of my white friends, I'll point things out to them and they'll say or do something around me, and I'll make the point that hey, maybe you shouldn't say that sort of thing because that's insensitive to me, or you should have never thought about, or you never thought about it this way. I can't think of a specific example off the top of my head. But they say things to me like, oh, I'd never thought about that. The same way I'll make an ignorant comment about women, and my wife will say, hey, Matt, you should think before you say that because of this thing. And I'll say, hey, I never thought of that. Because that's not my point of view. My point of view is limited to what, I see and I experience. So I guess at the end of the day, all I'm saying is the reason I'm always going to talk about race is because race is like a bullet wound in your body that people keep trying to put a Band-Aid on. And I'm like, you can't put a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. You got to get the bullet out. You got to sew up the injury. You got to give it time to heal. And the thing about the United States is we've never pulled out the bullet. We just keep talking around it. And it's like, it's not this. We can't deal with it or it's not a problem, or it's not as bad as you say. I'm like, no, there's a fucking bullet in your chest. You got to get the bullet out. And so it's like with a relationship. I don't mean to keep harping on this. If you never deal with the problem doesn't go away. In any relationship, you're going to have to deal with the problem if you want to have a successful relationship. So that's how I think of it. I'm like, we have to talk about this shit. It's awkward. And the funny thing is, nobody wants to talk about it. That's how sensitive it is.
Okay.
Like nobody, like you, if you and your partner have a real sensitive issue, and I'm sure you guys have something, or maybe you don't. I don't know.
Actually, I'm just trying to think. We don't have any sensitive issues.
Yeah, you guys might have a great relationship, but let's say
it's a perfect relationship, Matthew.
But let's say I'm super sensitive about. Okay, I'm a germaphobe, right? Okay, this is a real thing. And I like to wipe off shit because I'm like, oh, that shit's dirty, wipe it off. Like I touch a gas pump and I come home, I want to wash my hands immediately. If my wife says, Matt, since that's a real sensitive thing for me, if she comes home and I'm like wiping off shit and she starts to call me out on it, I'm like OCD. I haven't been diagnosed, but I am. That topic is super, super sensitive for me, and I'll start a fight over it because it's a weak thing for me. It's a weak spot, and I'm not strong in that department. And so my natural go-to is to defend myself or fight back because it's such a sensitive topic. And I feel like that's raised. It's such a sensitive thing for so many people. It's too difficult to deal with. And that's why I think there's so much like energy behind it. So much, hate and anger and emotion. There's so much behind it. If this country never deals with it, I don't think we fix the class issue. Because I believe you, there is a class issue. If we can get white people, black people, and Hispanic people to vote together in this country, we could have a whole nother party that addresses our issues. Because I'm not, and I think your guy was saying this on YouTube, like how he talks about Democrats, and it's like the Fox in the hen house or something. I can't remember how he put it. They get you with being like, we're your friend. I don't think there's a black person with a brain that thinks Democrats are here for us. It's the lesser of two evils. I don't look at Democrats as the saving grace, and I damn sure know that Republicans aren't. So what a lot of us are doing is we're choosing the lesser of two evils. Republicans are actively passing laws that reduce our civil rights. That's like a thing happening right now where we're like starting to get a little freaked out. Okay? Democrats won't do that. Democrats will use black people to get in power. And they will pass some laws that fuck with us, but they're not going to be as bad as the Republicans. And it's like, and then what your boy says, the guy on YouTube, he says he's a libertarian, so he's to vote Republican or Democrat. A lot of us look at that as, well, if we're being honest, my friend, you're supporting the Republicans, whether you want to or not, because they're going to show up to vote. And they're going to win. And in turn, we get fucked with. So
Good point.
So it's like it's kind of like putting your head in the sand. I'm like, dude, you're going to have to pick a side. You can't just say I'm a libertarian and like I'm not going to get involved because they're both fucking us. We know they're fucking us. But they're not fucking us as bad.
Yeah. There's so much to unpack here, and we've already been talking for like an hour 20.
Yeah.
I
mean, you said it'd probably be a few episodes.
Yeah, but then I don't know if people want to keep listening to me talk about this. How can I say this? Yeah, ultimately, I have to know my place. There are things that I'm just not going to fully understand because I've never set foot on your soil, and I'm taking the words of, say, Eric D. July. I'm taking your words, and nothing can. I think actually this is a good thing for everyone to take from. Is like, if you don't know, then you just shut the fuck up. And the more I learn about it, the more I feel like I should just shut up. Even though I would say, like, I'm trying to get involved, trying to, keep myself up to date on the nuances of the issues, or even just the big issues. You will always, to use a word, trump me in that regard, because I have no life experience. And I think there's enough people in this world who think they do have the experience, and they don't, and they're still, like, I'm saying, like, I should stop talking, but there are enough people in this world who don't say that, who aren't as cordial, and they want to continue it because they want to be right. Not that I'm saying I'm right or wrong. I just don't have that experience, so, what am I even doing in one sense?
No, I mean, like I said, I love that you do that, because I think one of the only ways that we figure out this race issue and class issue is we have to talk about it. Like, so many people say, what's the solution? And the whole thing is, I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. But I think how we get there is to start talking to each other. And then also, I think people, to me, seem to be looking for this big sweeping change. I don't think it happens that way. I think it's inches. I think it's little victories. I think it's very little victories. I think it's little inches. I think it takes every single person. I don't think, like, a black president getting elected solves the problem. It definitely does not. It's little inches, man. It's me talking to you on the podcast. It's my neighbor dealing with issues within their family. It's inches.
Yeah, you've got to communicate that expectation, because people did expect something big to come from the Barack Obama presidency, and actually, I consider his presidency a failure. I don't think in the end he was very good, especially with his foreign policy. He just seemed to do the same things as all the other white presidents. Personally, I mean, that could be another conversation. Mm-hmm. But looking at it from again outside of America, I don't know what you're getting on the inside, but I know that obviously will it be a binary issue? I don't know. I'm making an assumption there, but there are things that we felt outside of America that were just like, but he's just doing the same thing as Bush, and yet he's supposed to be this savior. He was hyped as this savior. People got upset, and then there's massive disappointment. Oh, we're not living in a post-racial society. Oh, I thought we were. Oh, I guess not, because it came back to, rebound with this next president, who supposedly is not a racist.
Well, one of the most important things that I can tell you from my perspective is the great success, or one of the great successes from President Obama's presidency, was representation.
Right.
Because my best friend from high school, his son was born during, he's black. His son was born under President Obama. And when his son got older and Trump got elected, he says to his dad, "Hey, Dad, a white man can be president?"
Wow.
So that's bananas. But like, what's that kid's, ceiling? Like, how does he see the world? This is kind of that representation conversation again. Like, how does he view himself? And this is something that, unfortunately, a lot of white people I know take for granted, because you're so well represented throughout the world. So it's not an issue to you. And I'm not saying you specifically, but
sure,
just white people. Like, they're like, well, why is that important? I'm like, well, it's not important to you because you're so well represented. You see yourself everywhere. We don't see ourselves everywhere. And then we run into all the issues when we're going to get like a job, because white people like to hire people like to hire people who look like them. Has been my experience. So that's why you might see a lot of black people working with other black people. But the whole thing is, we're not in positions of power and through a lot of places in this country, so we can't do a lot of those hiring. So that's why representation is important, because it gets us jobs, it gets us fair treatment, it gets us out the prison system, it keeps us alive. That's why representation is so important to people of color, because it saves our lives and it makes our lives better.
Yeah.
Because that's why Black Panther was so awesome for so many people of color, because it just creates, it lets people's imagination go wild. You know that you got Netflix?
No, I don't. I don't subscribe to movie or music.
Okay. There's this series on Netflix called Now They See Us, and I think it's now the most viewed show ever on Netflix, and it's about the 5 black kids that were wrongfully accused in Central Park for raping a white woman. And that show depicts basically these 5 black kids were wrongfully accused, and they spent like years in prison till they were like men, for this white woman who got raped by this one guy who got away, but he finally got, I think, admitted to it. But that show's the most viewed show on Netflix, and you won't believe like the conversations that white people are having with black people because of that show. They're like, oh, so the prison system is unfairly targeted towards African Americans. We're like, we've been saying that shit for years.
Yeah,
But-
it takes a movie to to open up someone's brain.
Yeah, but you watch a Netflix TV show and you're like, oh, we're like, yeah, So,
Yeah,
so that's why I say personally, representation is so important in film and in so many things, because it literally saves our lives.
I have this belief, just to go off what you were saying, that Game of Thrones allows everybody to watch something together, and nobody can get upset because it's a fantasy. It's not a direct representation of our world.
But you know what, John? We did get upset.
Oh, why? Because there's not enough black people in it?
There's not enough black people in it, but we still watched it and enjoyed it until they cut Masande's head off.
Oh, okay. Wow. No, but there's themes in there that, basically, if you're trying to, like, you're saying that the prison system is incarcerating more black people, and the white people are like, oh, yeah, I'm sure. Then they watch a TV program, something that isn't going to offend them as much. I know some TV shows do, but they don't have someone who they don't take it personally, because the TV is a passive form of entertainment.
Yeah, it's easier to
Whereas
digest.
it's different to a person engaging with you and saying, listen, white people are doing this, and they feel, like shit because, well, I'm a white person, so that means I'm this person that you're talking about. They take it personally, but a TV show like Game of Thrones allows people to see, especially, how evil people are and the different shades of being evil exist. You have Cersei Lannister, who is basically one of the most evil characters in the show, but she loves her children. And so it allows all the characters to have varying degrees of 50-50 good and evil, 70-30, 80-20, 99 and 1%, and the Night King is the absolute most evil person, supposedly.
Yeah.
He didn't get a chance to speak. They didn't let the blue man speak. And so my theory is that hopefully that nuance from that show allows people to sort of sit back and realize, oh, not everybody is going to be purely evil. Not everyone is going to be purely good. And so looking at it in binary terms is not appropriate, because all those characters can cloud your perceptions of others, because they do exist. Those types of people do exist. There is somebody like Trump. He is basically a bastard, but he does love his children. Even Clinton said so in the presidential primaries. He does love his children, and that does come from a position of positivity. But it's not enough for the rest of us, is it? Whereas Barack Obama, he is a better president, but he wasn't wholly 100% good. And it's not because it's a race thing. It's just because, as you said, be a good person. But he wasn't to other countries. He did kill people of color in other countries.
Yeah.
So if we look at, I know it sounds really lame because it takes a TV show to do this, but we have to look at people with this sort of ambiguity in mind. Because if you just say everything's just one thing or the other, then you're not going to have a healthy conversation. to the issues that need solving.
Yeah. So I guess kind of my solution to this issue is there's obviously, in my opinion, more that unites us than divides us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, it's
I believe
that cookie analogy.
I wholeheartedly believe that there's more that unites us than divides us. But I think
we should all be upset that there's one cookie left.
Yeah, but see that's the class issue. But my whole thing is we can't resolve that class issue till we resolve the race issue. Because I think the class issue is once we resolve that, to me it's like, okay, now we can start to move forward in a unified direction, no matter the color of your skin.
Yes,
but we have to get done with the race thing first, and I don't. That's going to take time.
I thought you said class thing first.
Well, no, I mean, like I said, that's my perspective, because if you don't resolve the race issue, it's going to pop up again when you're dealing with the class issue. But if you can get rid of the race issue, then we can all move forward with the class issue, because we resolved the race issue. If you never resolve the race issue, then it's going to pop up again, and we're going to be fighting again.
Maybe this is a weird point to sort of state our polar opposites on a topic, but I think the class issue should be fixed first, and the race issue would not solve itself, but would go towards being solved if you fix the class. Because again, I think the media plays a massive part in this. You know, the media is owned by a few white people, so again, race is a part of it. But if white people realize that some white people are, well, not some, I mean the majority of white people are in the same position, although this could be very contentious me saying this, but I just mean economically, if they're in the same position as black people, then they should look at each other much in the same way that Bruce Lee would say, you know, we're all the same under the heavens, right? He talked about representation as well. But he said, you know, we're all brothers and sisters under the heavens.
Right.
And if we realize that and we work towards that, it would solve. You know, we could unify. Then yes, we would solve this class issue and the race issue. I think solving one before the other is a bit weird. I think both have to be solved, because we have to see it's the rich white man that's the problem.
I mean, I'm open to that, them being resolved at the same time.
Yeah,
I'm open to that.
I have three things I want your opinion on before we wrap up, because I feel like we should be wrapping up.
We probably should.
Or disagree? Okay,
we probably should.
But or should I save it? No, I should tell. No, maybe I should tell you, and then you can give me the answers next time.
Okay, so let me write it.
How about that? So we can leave it on a cliffhanger. Okay. So I'll give you these three examples without trying to lead you into questioning them. So I'm saying there's everything about race. There was an issue in Sweden with H&M where there was a black kid wearing a T-shirt or a jumper, and it said "the coolest monkey in the jungle," and
that was fucked up.
People on Twitter said this is an issue of race, but people on Twitter don't represent the people in the real world, and the parents, obviously, who were in charge of the child, had to sign a model release form, and the parents were black. Now, they didn't have a problem with it because we use that term. Children are naughty monkeys, but because monkeys are sometimes represented as being the same as black people, then people get upset. So that's the first one. To me, that was not racist, but on a subjective level, for some people it was. But if the parents didn't care because they signed off on it, then why make it an issue of race? And if to represent black people as monkeys in America is very common, it isn't outside of the US. So your perceptions in the US shouldn't be transferred to us outside of the US, because then you're just perpetuating new issues for the rest of us to sort of talk about that we've already have no issue with. Okay. That's the first one. When Hurricane Katrina happened, there were some white people trapped in a stadium with loads of black people. And in the news article that I was reading, the black people supposedly were going to attack the white people. Are you still here?
Yeah.
Okay, it's just getting a poor connection on my end. Now, they were going to go for they said, supposedly in the article, that they were going to rape the white women, and because they had blonde hair. And then they didn't, because the white women spoke with an English accent. It was an English family that were trapped in Katrina at the time. They weren't white Americans. So once they knew that, but they were still white, they weren't going to rape them, which I thought was fascinating, because they are basing it on race, but then it's not about race because they're white people from a different part of the world. That's the second one. And then the third one is something closer to me, where I was on Periscope watching a black man talk, and I asked a question or raised a differing point of view, and he preempted his discussion by saying, "Are you white?" And I said yes, and because he thought I was Chinese, because my profile picture that you used looks a bit yellow, shall we say, on the skin tone. And he then started being critical, because he had to preempt his answer by asking first if I was white. And that to me represented somebody who's looking for an argument with white people. But I thought, hang on, but I'm not American white. I'm not white American. And so whatever you are basing your perceptions on is from your homegrown environment, and you're interacting with somebody who's not brought up in the same conditions or similar conditions as to other white people that you're usually combative with. Okay?
Okay, so hold on. I'm writing this down.
So maybe we can talk about those three things next time.
Let me ask you this. I had a question I wrote down for you.
Okay.
You made a reference earlier, and I don't know if you maybe just clarified it. You made a term, or you said the monkey something, I guess referring to a politician, but you were saying it meant different overseas than it does here.
Oh, this was at the beginning of the conversation, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I was like, wait, what do you mean with that? Like, I don't. You just kind of scooted past it. So I wanted to. Do you remember what you were referring to?
I was talking about the politician, and I mentioned monkeys. I'd have to listen to the podcast.
Was that? You said that's a term you use for children goofing around over there, or what was that?
Well, I thought. Well, actually, we do say that. Oh, he's just a stupid monkey. We say that to anybody.
Okay.
Children are just silly monkeys. But I have heard Americans also say it, where they thought, well, aren't all children monkeys, naughty monkeys?
Yeah,
so,
you said about
so then now
black person
claim
here,
that it's now a racist term is, you're turning. We're getting into the discussion, but it's about.
Okay, well, we don't. I want to get clarity on how you meant the term, because I can't just leave it there without having some frame of reference.
We're going to have to. I'm going to have to listen to the podcast, and then we can talk about monkeys next episode.
Okay, because like I said,
along with these three issues, because it's kind of it speaks about when you take back a word and you want to use it for positive intentions, like black people use the N word and only they're allowed to use it, and they use it as a positive, not a pejorative so much.
Yeah,
that's my understanding, right? There are things that are already a positive or not related to race, but then we seem to be like retarding and now interpreting it as a positive thing. That you're taking it back in the negative direction rather than the positive. So that's an interesting topic in itself.
Yeah, you say monkey over here, then you're gonna have some problems. So it's a huge issue. And then like I don't know how you guys over there talk about it, but like you just said, like retarding. Like we would never say that over here. We would say digressing.
That's a clinical term that's being people are saying you can't use that because it's offensive, but that's a clinical term for a specific thing. So language is being manipulated to not upset other people when it wasn't a word to upset. It's just that some people have used it maybe to upset others, reasons. And now we're saying no, you can't use that word now. And I deliberately used it in this conversation.
Okay. So yeah, we definitely have enough for another episode.
But do people want to listen? Do you need to give me a break again?
No, I mean, I'm happy to do it. I haven't had time to check the numbers. I'll try to get that to that tomorrow maybe because I'm pretty
Okay.
busy doing other things, working, trying to pay the bills.
Okay.
But I'll
The
get to
trilogy
it.
could be cool.
Yeah. But I think this was a better podcast. I think we kind of got to more substantive topics, so I'm happy about that. I think last time we were just kind of shooting the breeze, shooting the shit.
Really? I thought it was just an explainer.
Yeah.
More of an explainer than anything.
Yeah.
Because I thought we were deliberately not trying to get into anything. You just wanted me to explain
were.
this part of the world.
So yeah, I'm very happy about this.
I liked that last episode.
I'm not saying it was a bad episode. I'm just saying this felt more like we had more of a direction with the conversation.
Okay.
In my opinion.
Good. Okay.
So yeah, I'll get with you and we'll figure out when you want to come back. I want to have you back soon, so it's up to you.
Okay. Cool.
All right, man. Enjoy your day. I know it's morning over there. It's night over here.
8:42 a.m.
Yeah, 7:42 p.m. here.
Okay. Well, not too late for you then.
Yeah. All right, man.
Okay. Thanks, Matthew.
I'll see you
Take
soon.
care.
You too.
Sure.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. All right. Episode 38, I believe. Jonathan J.K. Morris. Let's go ahead and go to the playlist shuffle and see what happens.